Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Money decisions don't have to be either or. With Bank of America, they can be yes and. Like yes to sunny vacations and rainy day funds. Can our digital tools and guidance help you create the future you want? Yes. And help you keep enjoying today too. Do more with a bank that asks, what would you like the power to do? Explore our tips and more at bankofamerica.com/yes and.
You're listening to the Cardiff Central Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cardiff Central Podcast. Just myself, Harley, and Dan tonight. Carwyn's been up late working like a nerd, so he's decided to sit out on this one. How are you doing, Dan?
Yeah, all good. I'm not sure what working is. I didn't really understand that word when he texted it, so I'm not sure what he does, but. Yeah, I would say I go to a job and then come home from said job. I don't know if there's much working in between time.
Well, I think it's the joys of us two having 8 till 4 or 9 till 5 type jobs, and him being a little bit more as and when. So I'm going to be honest. I was very miserable on rap on Monday, so I'm hoping you're going to be able to cheer me up, especially when it comes to previewing the Ulster game. So shall we get straight to it? We'll have some. Well, so we did ask some questions, so we'll probably chuck some of these in and out as they can. Thank you very much, everyone who's responded. So, initial thoughts on the Edinburgh game?
Yeah, it was a disappointing one. I think I was particularly. I don't like to sort of linger on refereeing, but I was particularly disappointed with the refereeing on Saturday. I just thought it did have a fairly major bearing on the game, that particularly that just before half time where we're camped in there 22, we've got the man advantage. The first line out is pulled down as we're driving them all very much towards the line. I don't think there's much question that we go on and score if they don't hold that down. So you're kind of thinking, why is that not a penalty try? And then the way they turn over the second one, there's a clear throw across from Edinburgh, across the jumper, lands almost beyond our lifters, really, by the time that he's finished. And then I think it's Bowen Venter, the Edinburgh loosehead, who was sort of shimmied around the outside of our maul to actually affect the turnover. And then, where we go from where we should be having 7 points and retaining our man advantage there to Edinburgh go up the other end. Thomas Young gets yellow carded and suddenly it's 14-all, and we do well to keep them out, but the momentum has shifted away from us there. And I think through the second half, then there were just quite a lot of 50-50s which didn't go our way, which I think that's, you expect that to a degree in rugby with the sort of way the game is refereed. It does lean towards the home side a bit more. But I mean, you look at something like that Cam Winnett, where he's flagged for in touch, and I mean that replay shows that he's not even close. I mean, he's nowhere near in touch. So little bits like that rankle, and ultimately Edinburgh pull away. But having said that, from a Cardiff point of view, we didn't do enough at key moments either. I think realistically, we shouldn't have actually ended up in that position where we're relying on the driving maul to score. We should have been more clinical where we were going through the phases in the red zone before that. And I don't think Thomas Young needs to not really a pick and go. I don't know what you call it when you're part of the ruck and then you just appear on the other side of the ball. But yeah, I don't think he needs to force the try there. We could easily have scored at the next phase. I don't. Obviously, Josh McNally will be disappointed with his handling error as well after Evan Lloyd's carry, and then we sort of capitulate with the line out a little bit late on. So stuff we can work on. To finish on a positive note, though, to be a bit more positive about it, I thought our defence was a lot better this week, which is weird to say when we've lost 27-8. It doesn't really make sense. But none of the try. I didn't think what we asked for last week was no soft tries, and taking out that last try with the overthrow, which isn't a defensive error really, it's a set piece error. None of them were soft defensively. We made Edinburgh work for those first 3 tries, and it was a particularly good finish from Duan there, which can win it, can't do a lot about, in fairness. But yeah, defense was a lot better.
Being the same size as Duhan,
yeah.
He's the only way you'd have stopped him there.
You'd have to like
be so physically massive, you stop his momentum.
A comedy spinach eat, and then he becomes Popeye or something like that as he's running across the tackle Duan. But I thought our kicking and aerial game was really good as well. Aled Davis, his best kicking performance to date. Sheedy backed that up well, and then some really good chasing. Teddy gave Hamer Webb, win it defensively, aerially, very, very solid. Don't think he missed one being plucked out of the sky there. So those areas are good, and areas which Cardiff aren't always brilliant at, but then the areas where we are usually quite good at attacking and being a bit more clinical. It's close, that period of play up to Thomas Young being penalised for being in front and forcing the try there. That's a really good passage of play from us, particularly against 14 men, where we weren't very good at that the week before against the Scarlets. But it feels like it's close to clicking the attack there, but it's just that big last step which we're not quite taking, and a few changes, and the new guy still bedding into the squad. But yeah, on the whole, it was a disappointing one to finish at 27-8, and I feel that roughly, it wasn't all down to you. It was an element of it was out of your hands. But I think there was enough to like there going into this weekend that hopefully we can get a win.
Yes, I mean, so one of the big things for me is that our pack started looking very, very leggy. I noticed Thornton I didn't see Thornton come on at all. And Nathan on Twitter, he's like saying, do you think the fact that we haven't been able to rotate our second row as much, like McNally and Teddy have started every game, I believe, in this regular season, and and there was no second row subs last week against Scarlets. The week before against Scarlets, we didn't replace him there, and McNally in particular, I think, is starting to look very much in need of a rest, which is great because we've got quite a long break coming up after Ulster, but not so great because we need another break because we're not sure what's with Seb Davis, and I'm worried that maybe Thornton is carrying something, which is why they didn't want to bring him on towards the end.
I think it's an absolute right point. I mean, when we did our team selection on the pod last week, we had Teddy and Thornton in there purely because McNally was looking tired at the end of the Scarlets game as well, and he's a guy who is towards the back end of his career now and is adjusting to playing week in, week out on artificial pitches, which I'm sure is having a bit of an impact on the old joints. And he also hasn't been a week in, week out player for Bath over the last season or two. He's been more bit part when called upon. I think maybe the other element is that Thornton is very good at the line out, and I think he is more physical now than he was when we first picked him up a couple of years ago, but he is still not, a physical lock. That's not what he does. And when you don't pick McNally in there, then how, it's a balancing act of how much do you lose when he gets leggy in the last quarter versus how much do you lose when he's just not there at all.
This is what I was wondering is Thornton, particularly, with his line out start, he probably would have gone for a slightly different line out call. The thing with his now, Teddy obviously very recently has taken on the line out calling. Like, is a fresh Thornton really a worse option than a McNally at what was probably on about 60% by then?
Yeah, and that's the question for Sherritt to consider. Obviously, he feels that that McNally is the better option. Obviously, it's easier in hindsight now to look back at the line-out issues, particularly in that last quarter, and say I'd have brought Thornton on. But yeah, I mean, it's on the increasing evidence of the last 2 weeks. You've got to think, right, we've just may as well just try Thornton because it's not working with McNally anyway. You know, whatever the right option is, we've gone with McNally, stuck with McNally twice. He's run out of gas in the last quarter twice. Ended up yellow carded on the weekend. We didn't quite get over the line against the Scarlets, where a fresh legs might have given us something to that pack. And yeah, so at this point, I think now you've got to say, if this weekend there still is no Seb, and if Donald, I noticed, was on the unavailable list last week as well, if both of them are still unavailable, he's got to either start with Thornton potentially, or at least go to him off the bench at 60 odd minutes or so and give us something in that last quarter.
For me, it was one of those things of like, there's no point putting someone on the bench if you're not intending to use them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you want them to have an impact. Speaking of, not necessarily sure we had as much impact off the bench as we'd have liked. I thought, I think,
yeah,
Man sort of came back fresh, straight thing. I think having him and Big Mac coming on, two very inexperienced players, and we're taking off a lot of experience, might have. Of course, I mean, admittedly, with Thomas Young had a fantastic debut red card, and I'll just put that he probably thought his feet were both feet were behind the ruck.
Yeah, I think in terms of our bench is that it didn't have it probably wasn't that it didn't have much of an impact. It's that it didn't have as much of an impact as Edinburgh's did. It's probably the way that I would describe it.
I think so. Yeah, it's probably not what we were hoping for from it.
Yeah,
I think I think Alan Lawrence is probably one of our best players, and I might have been tempted to take off to leave him on, even if it is pushing him to 6 for a little bit longer, just to ease Mac into the game. But I mean, also as well, there was a bit of that period where when they came on, and it was just an Edinburgh onslaught. So I feel like we didn't have a chance to get into the ball in hand.
I thought Man, because the penalty that he concedes as well, like in the last sort of 2-3 minutes, taking the guy out beyond the ruck, it's a penalty of a guy who hasn't played for a bit and is desperate to come back on and sort of make an impact, and like you said, being a bit inexperienced as well.
I also feel like it's a very harsh one, because I feel like the previous 70 odd minutes, and it's the same ref who I think we had in. It was the same ref for the Glasgow game, who was very anything goes at ruck time. Yeah, it was. Right, no, I'm going to be super strict on the ruck.
Yeah, it was weird timing, but I mean,
like, I couldn't even say too much about the that push on Mulder when he sort of intercepts the ball, hacks it through, and then he's chasing, and then he gets pushed by it's not W, it was the Charlie Sheol, I think it is, the replacement Edinburgh scrum half. Push him. Well, I can't say that Dan Thomas is okay pushing Jamie Doby.
Yeah, that's fair. But I like that sort of thing with Alex Mann there, is like what I was saying about the 50-50 calls, and that when you're away from home, and especially when the scoreline's sort of against you a bit at that point as well, you can't be giving the referee an easy opportunity to ping you like that. And it was, I mean, I watched it live, and I think when I watched it back that minute, I think I'd sworn at him before the referee had even given it. It was so obvious that he'd taken him out beyond the ruck. So it was just a little bit disappointing that last quarter, the way they did. I know the referee was against us and the yellow card as well, but yeah, that lack of a little bit of a lack of leadership, and just sort of guys trying to step out and make things happen by themselves. You don't turn that around individually, you turn that around as a team by just sticking to processes and sticking to game plans. And I think too many guys were trying to be heroes a little bit in that final quarter and make something happen themselves, rather than just play the game as a team and win it that way. But it was good to get those guys back, and we didn't actually expect anything from the game. I don't think any of us had predicted a Cardiff win in the end, did we, last week?
I was expecting a point.
Well, yeah.
I was expecting us to at least match last. I said, I mean, in fairness, we didn't get anything. Because I don't think we managed the bonus point against Edinburgh at home last season.
No,
because they bought him Willem Mata, and he sort of scored 12 points by himself just by being Willem Mata. But he didn't actually have to cross the try line. That's just how much an impact it was worth.
But where we didn't expect anything, and I think it does leave us in a decent position going into this weekend in terms of being very easy fixes. The last few weeks where you've looked at some elements of the defence and thought, I don't know if that's an overnight fix or anything, but I think that what went wrong on Saturday night, and hopefully, you get a little bit of decision-making luck and a little bit of home side advantage coming into next weekend. That if we a few little tweaks here and there in the attacking game and a big learning curve for Teddy, I thought, line out wise, because Edinburgh went hard at our line out, and Evan Lloyd has taken a fair bit of flack, and I do think rightly so. His line out throwing was poor in that final quarter, but it's also worth pointing out that the line out wasn't going great with Dav Hughes throwing either. We'd lost a couple early on because Edinburgh were just going really hard at us in the air. We'd lost Donnell as another option. We weren't really using both of them as a jumper at 6 there.
Yeah, but he's not, as he. Whereas I suppose at least with Alex Matten, if the plan is to bring Alex Mann in, if there's still no Donnell,
yeah,
he's a good line-out job. Apparently, actually, towards the end of last season, he was actually one of our big sources of line-out ball.
Yeah, but prior to him, we basically ran short lineouts, 4 or 5 men, Teddy and McNally in there, almost certainly going to Teddy most of the time. And we were quite easy to read, and Edinburgh were going hard at it. I think it's one for Teddy to a good learning point for him when it comes to learn calling the lineouts about how to break that mold of them marking you out of the game. And then also it's just a side effect of Cornel van Zyl still being very new as the forwards coach. That line out that he's putting in after 4 or 5 weeks, you're not going to have multiple bailout options, everybody on the same page. Whereas, if you look at your top line outsides like Munster, somebody like that, somebody like Peter Omani and Tyg Byrne, they've been in there calling those lineouts for, Peter Omani, I think he's been there for about 450 years now. So they have a lineout system that everybody knows, what call A is and what bailout option A and bailout option B is. That there's very little chance of they're being marked out of the game like we were on Saturday. So I don't think it'll be a problem every week, but obviously they'll have to think of something this week to rectify it, because Ulster will have seen that and will go for that big time, I think.
And Ulster do play with a lot of, with Cormac as a tutor, they do play with the second row at 6. Ian Henderson's coming back, who is a pretty decent line-out forward himself.
Yeah.
Just thought, most of the questions when we put out to Twitter are basically squad-based. So I just sort of quickly run through them as we're talking about, briefly talking about the second row, especially with the other, us being linked to a world-class back row. I mean, we're also linked to Freddie Thomas, but Dragons seem to be getting first dibs on him. Ask anyone who it could be. Some suggestions of, a lot of people saying, do we need a world-class back row? I think we're pretty. I think between the three of us, we discussed that, Thomas Young, Dan Thomas, and Tulupi Faletau all potentially out of contract end of the season. So you're going to need to replace at least one of them, preferably with someone of very good quality. Yeah, I think it's no secret. Yes, we probably need another second row. Preferably a Josh McNally style, but maybe a bit younger. Just titled whilst Teddy's still transitioning.
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what they do with squad building, and I think touching on the story about the back row, I think the thing is that somebody asked who do we think it is. There is nobody at the moment. The way it is that Fissler on Rugby Pass has written that essentially the news story is Darren Allinson, as our new head of recruitment, has put the word out to agents that we're in the market for a back rower, and so if anything comes up, sort of let us know, which is sort of how it works a bit in those top circles as I understand it. And then obviously one of the agents has mentioned to Fissler and Rugby Pass or Cardiff are looking for a back row, and that's what he's written. So there's nobody signed. At least that's not what the news story suggests. And it's not that there's one person we're going after. It's just that obviously there's going to be a fair amount of change potentially in that part of our squad next season. Like you say, Young, Dan Thomas, Faletau all out of contract. I think McNally potentially only would have signed for 1 year as well, in the same way that Thomas might have, so he could be out of contract. I think Teddy's all right, but I'm not sure about Seb, who might also be coming out of contract as well. So, and then it's about who do you re-sign with, whether we're on up to 6 million budget by then, or whether we're still on 4.5 million. Faletau is currently on a lot of money. If we are going to choose to re-sign him, he'll have to take a significant pay cut, I think, to make it sort of worthwhile for us business-wise. Thomas Young will be on a fairly decent wage as well, I thought, at the time we signed him. So he might have to look to consider to be taking a pay cut as well. He's, top side of 30 now, not a regular international. So in terms of business case, if you're Cardiff Rugby, you're probably looking at a lower wage for him. And then you also have to consider guys coming through. Lucas De La Rue is going to break through at some point as well. So do you want too many senior players there? Evan Rees playing for the Rags quite regularly. Alex Manning and Mackenzie Martin will be wanting to play more over the next few years. And the sort of other aspect of it is how many non-Welsh qualified players you can have as well. Tina Stabia is coming out of contract at the end of the season. Fan favourite, really good player, but is 10 a position we want to be holding onto a non-Welsh qualified player in? Potentially, you could look to move Ben Thomas at that point into fly half full time and bring Steph Emmanuel through as a 12. Jared Evans might be available to come back at the end of the season, not playing regularly for Harlequins. Harry Wild's looking better week in, week out for the Rags, as we'll come on to in a bit. So, yeah, squad building wise, there's a lot of considerations for Cardiff next year. And obviously people will see, we're after a back rower and we've got loads of them and stuff. But it's not as simple as all of the players there this season are going to be there next season. And I think supporters should start getting their head around the fact that we will probably lose 1, 2, 3 maybe players we currently consider top first choice options in our first Cardiff 15 because of the financial restrictions that we still have, even if the budget does go up slightly, and also because we have to manage how many non-Welsh qualified players we got and the next crop of youngsters coming through as well.
Yeah, I mean, with the back row thing, I mean, Sean Moore asked maybe Cameron Heineken because he's got the Welsh man.
Wouldn't be against that.
He is very firmly wants to play for the Springboks, so I very much. I mean, saying that it wouldn't rule him out if it meant that maybe it meant he was getting more game time, but I think he does get quite a fair bit of game time at the balls, though. He is behind Elrach almost internationally and almost at club level now, so that may make him think about moving, but I won't worry too much about that. On non-Welsh qualified, so John Roberts on Facebook, Robbo, the man with the drums, if anyone who knows Cat well, he was basically suggesting that some of Cardiff's best periods, so in 2010 and the 2018 when we won Challenge Cups, we had 2 or 3 international, basically internationals who were non-Welsh qualified, who were available year round, and it's just like, is that what this squad is missing? Do you think?
Oh, unquestionably, that they've look. I think not just Cardiff. If you look at every Welsh side when they've had their best periods, Ospreys, Galactico era, us, sort of similar-ish time, 2008 to 2012, Scarlets when they won the league. The spine of those teams have largely been non-Welsh qualified players. I think the Cardiff squad at the moment probably has slightly too many non-Welsh qualified players in the sense that we're spreading the amount of money we could spend on them too thinly, so that we've got no real top class overseas players. And then I also think it's that because of the necessity of the last year or two and where we've been, that they are slightly targeted in the wrong areas. I think next summer, I'll say this now, but I think we've all said every year the last 5 years, but this may well be Ray Lilo's last season, potentially, if he doesn't carry on going for another 10
more
years.
4 more years.
It is becoming a bit of a Foul Felice thing again, but I think it feels like it probably is Ray's last season this season. Mentioned Dabia potentially heading back. And then you've got, Ben Donnell at flanker. I don't know how long we signed him for when we picked him up, but if he's out of contract, is flanker somewhere that we need to be picking up non-Welsh qualified players as well? Ed Byrne, I don't know how long we signed him for, but Rhys Barrett's coming through, so it's not necessarily him. But then I look at, I think it'll switch from where we've perhaps signed non-Welsh qualified players to fill gaps in the squad, hopefully we can start focusing on signing non-Welsh qualified players to add real quality to the squad. And then you're looking at, a real quality non-Welsh qualified second row. Not dissing Josh McNally in that sense at all, but I think if ideally you'd have somebody peak of their career, peak of their powers who would be in there. I think a tight head would be a really good addition as well. As we've had some really good non-Welsh qualified tight heads, Arhip and Felice over the years. So I think they're quite key usually in a position we don't produce a lot of. And then you could look to, scrum half, potentially Mulder's doing a decent job at the moment. Alan Davis is not going to be around forever. So maybe you look to pick up a real top quality 9 where we didn't fully replace Thomas Williams. But yeah, I think it's absolutely the case that at the moment we've got non-Welsh qualified players in there to fill gaps. But if we want to compete, we need non-Welsh qualified players to bring real quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I said this seems like a seasonal debate about where should we be spending our money and who should we get in. So we're going to move on to the rags in a second, but before we do, if you are enjoying the pod, please do like, share, subscribe, leave us any comments. We can't promise that, we do try to respond to everyone, whether it's from the central podcast account or down to his Cardiff Rugby Life account. We will try and answer everything either on the pod or to you directly. Don't just a quick note though, don't bother trying to message me on Twitter after this week, because I'm leaving it. So it'll just be the central pod account, because I'm finally fed up of that hellhole. And please do check out the other members of the Rap family. I'm personally and very selfishly going to suggest the women's Rap, because it's awesome. It's probably one of the most cancelable pods on that in the family, because it's just hot take central, and Julia and Sean especially are unbelievably good and knowledgeable about the women's game. All right, so that's the plug. Onto the rags now. So another win. So I mean, at least there's something to help keep the Cardiff positivity going.
Yeah, the old, you can always rely on the rags to make sure the weekend goes okay in the end. Another slow start. I think they were 14-0 down quite early on against Aberavon at the Arms Park on Saturday. But as with away at Swansea the weekend before, absolutely flew back into it. I don't think they conceded a point for 62 minutes for winning 31-14 and securing the Super double bonus point, or whatever they're calling it, for 6 points. Lots to like for the young players. I mentioned Harry Wild briefly earlier. Just watching the highlights of the Swansea game and the Aberavon game, he looks like he's developing really nicely. He was involved with, I think it was 3 tries at Swansea, and he was involved in 4 tries against Aberavon on the weekend. Really nice touches for Tom Bowen to score and for Jason Harris to score, and then really nice try taken himself where he brings Elijah Evans, Derry Cross on the pullback pass from the left wing, and then just floats around to the short side and quick dummy and over the line. I think he's somebody who we've known has had talent for a while, but just hasn't been able to put together a run of games, whether it's because of injury or under-20 call-ups, to really kick on. But where he's been back fit the last couple of weeks, and as with Josh Thomas injured and Fraser Jones, he's made that 10 jersey his own. Just checking off the top of my head, I think he's still Wales under-20 this year. So he'll be their fly half, you'd have thought, going into the under-20 Six Nations and the Junior World Cup next year. And I think having a bit of experience from this year will do him well as well. So if he can finish the season strongly, I've no reason to believe that he won't be able to push for first team rugby next season. And then Elijah Evans is another one who's looked really good. I thought he might step up this season potentially, but obviously will maybe be more injury dependent than bringing him through. But he's really big. He's quick at 13. happy going into contract or beating people around the outside. So yeah, if Lilo does call it a day, then we might have a ready-made replacement there potentially. But yeah, great stuff from the Rags.
Maybe bring him through on gate. Maybe bring him through for a few games this season before throwing him in next season.
Yeah, that would be ideal, but it's difficult. Going to be difficult to drop Lee Lewis still at most points this season. I think maybe if the season peters out a bit, you might get him in at the end. But yeah, pack is going really well for the Rags. Seem to be dominating most teams. Aberavon usually have a pretty big pack. They're going through a bit of a transition at the moment with going into Super Rugby Cymru. They've invested in quite a lot of young local talent and ditched a bit of their more experienced Welsh Premiership guys, but still a decent outfit and a really good win. I think we are undisputed top of the league now, the Rags, even if Newport win their game in hand, which got called off at Aberavon a few weeks ago. They can't jump us at the moment. So another home game this weekend, home to Bridgend, 4:15 as a double header with the Ulster game. Bridgend going much better this season than they have the last year, but you make Cardiff favourites going into it still, and if they can get a win to finish off this block where Super Rugby Cymru also finishes a bit for the autumn internationals, then I think it's a block that will have exceeded the expectations of the majority of us who maybe thought they might start the season a bit slowly, but have just absolutely flown other than that Carmarthen away blip.
Yeah, and I mean, considering when you were talking about Super Rugby Cymru and the squad before the summer, we were saying, it'd be good if they, there's a few players bloated. We can see who's going to be the next generation coming for Cardiff, and they're putting their case up to try and win the whole blooming thing. So good on them. I'm not saying they will, but because there's still some very good teams that they haven't necessarily played yet. But they've looked impressive beating who they have.
Absolutely.
So as we said, that's going to be a double header with the Ulster game. So very quick preview on it, I think, and then we'll get into the meat of the Wales squad. So Ulster had a very shaky start. They've now had two quite good wins on the bounce, including a drubbing over the Ospreys. They had a load of injuries and call-ups to the Emerging Ireland Tour, and now those players are slowly filtering. They're due to get Rob Herring and Ian Henderson back, and one other, and I've forgotten the name. I think it's Nick Timoney. Don't hold me to that. So they're strengthening up. Cardiff should have a few more players back. So I think the idea was that we might have been holding his head back for this game. Same with Corey Domachowski. How do you feel this game's going to go?
It's difficult one to call. Ulster obviously have gone through a massive change over the last sort of, even say 6 months, but certainly 12 months, where got rid of their coach during last season, have brought the Ireland and the 20s coach in, and there's been more of a focus on young talent where they've got a bit of financial trouble there, said goodbye to big earners like, sent Kitchoff back to South Africa, which I think not many teams are cutting the contract of Stephen Kitchoff sort, but that's where they've ended up. Like I said, started a bit slowly, 2 good wins, but having watched that Ospreys one with their trouble, I don't know how much I don't know how much I learned about Ulster and how much you can put on that really as being a good performance, because Ospreys are not going so well and then being hampered by so much injury and unavailability. It was they battled all right, but wasn't much they could do really away at Ulster. I think physically we're going to have to really go to the well again with the pack. Ask a couple of guys to dig in, like McNally, like Dav Hughes. A couple of the back rowers, I think maybe have to ask Alan Lawrence to put us on our back almost literally again as well. But I think this is the game home game outside of the Welsh games where you probably look at and think this is a game we really could win. I wouldn't go as far to say should, but for Cardiff now with 3 straight losses, 2 of them at home, where we were hoping to really, I wouldn't say kick on, but show a little bit of improvement and progress from last season. I think this one is one that we really have to win. If we go into the international break off 4 losses, 3 of them at home, then the questions will be asked maybe a bit more outside of the bubble than inside of it about, are we really improving? Are we really progressing as a team? So if we match them physically, I've no doubt that we've got the talent in the back line to match Ulster. I think, if you go man for man outside of the pack, I sort of get like at least say we're equal overall with them, and it's just a question then of how clinical we can be. That's basically what it comes down to from a Cardiff point of view. Being composed in the red zone, trusting yourselves to go through the phases, and then when the opportunity arises, properly going for it and not trying to force anything or not making simple errors to take the wind out of our sails. So matching physically and being clinical defensively, I think Ulster will score. They've been scoring pretty well. Stockdale seems to be back in really good form for them on the wing. Not quite peak 2018, but getting back towards that way. And we'll have to accept that they will get over the line a couple of times. But unlike against the Scarlets and against Edinburgh, we will have to be clinical and put our own points on the board, and we can come out on top, I think.
Yeah. I said the stat on Wrap that against Edinburgh, we got 0.8 points per 22 entry. And that I don't want to be that guy, but that isn't good enough. Bear in mind the game we beat Scarlets, we were on about 3.5, 4 points per entry. Actually, even more than that, I think it was like 5.2. Basically the only thing that dropped our points per 22 entry was goal kicking.
Yeah.
Which actually, I do want to quickly go into it because based on one of Warren Gatland's comments in his presser with Wales squad was about whether or not someone would be goal kicking, and he's asking for Ben Thomas. A match, is Ben Thomas getting reps in at kicking at goal? And it does ask something I've been calling for quite a while. Is it time we get Ben Thomas as our main goal kicker and just take that pressure off De Beer and Sheedy?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. It obviously gets raised because Anscombe appears to be physically unable to kick a goal now because his groin is made of marshmallow. Sheedy, what's he kicked twice for goal? Was 50% on Saturday, I think. Missed the conversion, but kicked the penalty in front. He seems to be striking the ball okay, but not with any real confidence about where it's going to go. Before the season, I think Sheedy had kicked over the last 2 years sort of 78%, and Ben Thomas was about 74%. De Beer was a little bit closer to 70%. So it made sense to start with Sheedy there, but obviously now Sheedy's percentage is, I think, probably still below 50% this season. So I think it is time to give Ben the tee, and what we've learned of Ben Thomas over particularly the last sort of 12 to 18 months is that having that responsibility doesn't seem to faze him. When he's given the responsibility of starting at 12, having moved around the pitch a bit, he takes that on and becomes a leader in that back line quite quickly, and then gets the responsibility of starting at 10 for Wales last summer, and that didn't seem to faze him at all either.
And was very good kicking at goal for Wales.
Yeah.
They weren't exactly easy kicks.
And then when he gets a captaincy for Cardiff this year, that doesn't faze him either. He's quite happy to take that on. So, I've no qualms with him being the goal kicker at all. I think if I was jockey, I think I'd probably go for it, but I probably would have given it to Rory Jennings last week potentially as well. I maybe would have said he kicks ahead of Sheedy, but yeah, absolutely time for Ben to take the tee, and especially if they start with Sheedy, okay, but if he misses one, I think Ben's got to take over. There's got to be a show that they're at least doing something about the issue of goal kicking at Cardiff on the weekend, because if we just keep sticking with below 50% off Sheedy's boots, then I don't really know what we're saying to ourselves or the opposition. We're basically saying we don't really care about these sort of little points, and we're not going to put any pressure on you.
Because one of the things talking with Hugh from Scarlet's co-host on the women's pod, we were there discussing. We were discussing goal kicking. He worked out that the average across all goal kickers in the URC is about 73%. So if you're both doing quite well with Sheedy, isn't it? But he did ask me a very important question: is are Cardiff turning down easy shots at goal because they don't have faith in goal kicking? Because there are some times when you just say like that and they've had sets of battering down the door, it doesn't look like they're going to break through. Almost need a reset, when actually just taking the 3 is, at least then you're getting some points out of that visit. I do wonder if that's think particularly with, otherwise the go-to is the line out, which can just sometimes, even when we've been going well all game, can just have one where it just goes completely in the wrong direction, literally. So yeah, that's just one of those things I would be looking at personally. Anyway, so quickly, should we quickly do the team for that?
Yeah, it's quite tricky in some areas because obviously we don't know at the time of recording on Wednesday evening. I don't think Cardiff have done any of their press stuff yet. I haven't seen anything online to suggest we have. And so
I saw a clip of Mellon talking about the game that
well,
came on my timeline, but that could have been from a day or two ago. It just sort of came up and I went, oh, okay.
He's not going to give us any injury information either, I don't think, because if I know Mellon from press conferences, it'll just be, oh, I don't know, and that'll be the end of it. So yeah, we don't have any up-to-date injury news, but yeah, I think we can give it a decent enough go.
One thing with asking about with Gareth McGilvery's question, because he was asking about young players being on that, covering the internationals. As far as we're aware, the internationals are free and available to play. So,
yeah, they don't go into camp till next Monday, so it'll only be if we've chosen to rest them or if some sort of Ospreys-esque edict has come down from above that so-and-so can't play. But I don't think we've got any. I don't think any of our players are like sort of top Welsh starters who would really come under that banner of only playing a certain amount of time at the moment. And if they are, like somebody like Ben Thomas, then obviously we didn't start him last week, so maybe that counts as resting him a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I said pack is well, let's do the easy thing. We'll do the hookers because we've got a choice of two.
Yeah, I'd stick with,
again.
yeah, Dav. I thought Dav was pretty good. Like obviously, like the line, I did struggle his first 2 or 3 throws, but he was pretty good around the park again. And I think it would be a huge ask of Evan Lloyd to bounce back immediately to start after the throw-in of last quarter last week. And then I think if they're fit, which well Azza is, and we believe Dommer's back, then I'd say Dommer and Azza is probably quite an easy prop selection as well.
And then Burn Littrick on the bench, or do you give Burn a bit of a rest and let Southworth? 'Cause I thought Southworth overall looked very good off the bench last week.
He did, yeah. I think I'd go Burn this one just really just because of the Irish thing, and I think he almost did sign for Ulster last year as well. So he's maybe a chance for him to show them what they missed out on,
or what they avoided.
Well, maybe, yeah. Hopefully the former rather than
second row, I said unless Seb's fit.
I think it will be Teddy and McNally again. I don't if he stuck with them up to this point, I don't necessarily see him changing it just for the last game.
Yeah, agreed. Back row, I quite like to see the back row that started the game against Edinburgh again.
Yeah,
I do kind of feel like we need that extra line out option.
Yeah, I think hopefully we can just sort it by just sort of lengthening the line out a bit and using both of them a bit more. He's not the our top line out guy, but he is an option. So I thought open play wise, like Young was obviously fantastic. I thought both of them allowed Young to be that fantastic with some of his work, and then Big Al's pretty much undroppable at this point. So.
Yeah, so I said the only other thing I was thinking of, because Donald's injured.
Yeah, we haven't heard how bad or otherwise that is. So.
I'd say is, and even if it's not too bad, I've said the only thing I'd say is maybe you go out to the bench as an impact, and then you have both the mates man. But then I don't want to mess up a winning combo between the three that started.
Yeah.
Halfbacks.
We have.
Davis
I think
and Sheedy again.
Yeah.
To be that, or would you start Bevan?
I definitely bring Bevan back in, and Bevan and Davis would be my 9s again in the squad. I think it was right to give Mulder a run out, but I think in this one it'll be Bevan and Davis. Would I start Bevan or Davis? That's a tough one, that one. Yeah, I think maybe stick with Davis. Played well last week, so we're on a reward basis. And yeah, Davis and Sheedy, and because we assume Debby is still injured, I think.
Yeah, right. Centre combo. Ben Thomas, I think, comes back in.
Definitely Ben, yeah.
I
don't know if we mentioned him earlier, but a word for Roy Jennings on debut, I thought
he was excellent.
good.
I thought
Yeah,
he filled in the Ben Thomas role very well. Although
definitely.
I would also say it was very noticeable when Ben Thomas came off the bench. It seemed to everything was just that little half a second quicker. I know it
Yeah.
ultimately ended up with no major points, but it was.
I think we said about Jennings that he's not a rotation option. He's very much there as backup for when Ben is either being rested or it's not like if he gets injured, yeah, they're not going to like do every other week or anything like that, But I think it was promising that Jennings showed that he is a very good option for that, and that the drop off isn't a major one if Ben is either we're giving him a feet up 1 week or he gets injured. But yeah, definitely Ben back this week, and then. 13's interesting because I thought Grady went quite well there actually last week. We used him quite well in attack and he was all right defensively.
As always, missed tackle stats come caveats. He did miss 3. I think one of them includes the one where he missed Duhan but manages to get him back, which is something that doesn't happen to Duhan very often. It's like normally if he's bounced you, that's it, you've been bounced. So good. It's good for him. We do have Ray, and he is an infinitely better operator in defense at 13. But again, as you said, Grady's going well. I think we're starting to use him in attack better at 13 as well. But I think we're starting to learn how to get him into how and where to put him in the line.
Yeah, because I thought obviously we give him he's always got that outside arc run, but I thought the way we used him on the outside of a pod of 3 for the try that we did score, and then he drives us up sort of 5-10 meters, was actually quite clever play design from
it was almost like the tip inside the tip option. The runner coming in around the pod late. I'm not saying jockeys be listening to the pod again, but shall we go with Grady? The only thing I would say is when Grady had his HIA, you noticed the mid drop off midfield.
Yeah.
In terms of physicality when he had Ben Thomas and Jennings. And I don't think Lilo is an impact. I don't think he's the guy you could bring off the bench. I think if Lilo plays, he starts.
Yeah. It's one of those ones where I don't mind either way. If we're going to predict, though, I think my prediction would be Lilo. I think Jockey will bring him back in. But if I was picking, I'd be happy with Grady anyway. So, yeah.
I mean, we'll get onto that debate now. We talk about the wings. So for me, first of all, Stevens, if he's fit, he's playing because I think he's just electric.
Yeah, he was great
as Millard is. I think he just has something different. He just gives us something X factor, which we've been missing on that wings without Josh Adams or Theo Cabango.
A couple of real bumpers in defence as well. Like I know it ended up
good hits.
It ended up with the yellow card, but I think it's the Edinburgh hooker who sort of breaks away down the right wing, and Stevens just runs across and just sort of picks him up and slaps him down. Really, but there was a really good defensive read early in the second half. Then as well.
It was that one where you could tell how wet the grass was because he tackled the hooker and he just carried on sliding. And I just thought, I love that.
But yeah,
you should find a gif.
It's going to be harsh on Hamer Webb because I thought, particularly kick chase wise and aerially, he was pretty good. But it's probably going to be Hamer Webb who drops out, I think, for the starting 15.
So here's one of the things I was thinking is, do we start Hamer Webb and have Grady on the bench and you have him covering 30, not 3, covering, he hasn't put on that much weight, covering 13 and wing.
It's definitely,
and then it's giving him some rest minutes as well.
It's definitely an option. I think the counter argument, which probably Jockey will come back to, is just that if he's there, you pick him essentially. But
to be fair, I don't feel like backs necessarily need the rest. I mean, when they get on a bit, but they don't necessarily need the rest from game time as much as forwards.
Yeah,
on their playing style.
It's a fair question, I think, and worth asking. But I think, ultimately, it will. I think it just will be Grady. Same as
I'd like to point out, I'd already written him in.
Yeah.
I was just one of those.
And then probably
similar logic. Win it fit, so win it plays.
Yeah. It just is win it.
I think was it they say with Leinster that if Hugo Keenan, the next best player to have at fullback for Leinster other than a fit Hugo Keenan is a 70% fit Hugo Keenan.
Yeah, we're not far off that win it.
Yeah, so that's our run on side. I said the replacement front row basically picked itself. Evan Lloyd because he's the only other fit hooker.
Yeah.
And then Bernard Littrick. Who do you want 19, 20, and I'll say 21 jerseys just in case we do decide to stick with the 6-2.
Does he go 6-2 again? I'm thinking probably yes.
I think again another physical team like Ulster is needed.
Yeah. So
but again, I want to caveat this with you need to, if you're going to go 6-2, use 6-2.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And if it is Seb, if Seb is fit, I think Seb is 19 this week, and on the basis of like he's obviously been pictured back in training last week, and that we're not using Thornton. I think even if Seb isn't 100% fit, it will probably be Seb. Like even if he's like 85, 90%, they would put him on there, I think, this week. And then probably stick with Martin and Mann as your other options, which is harsh on Dan Thomas to miss out 2 weeks in a row after a great start to the season. But I think just sort of balance and impact wise, I don't necessarily think Dan Thomas is the best impact option. Really, I don't think that's.
For me, I think we've discussed this. I think in your match day 22, you have Dan Thomas or Thomas Young.
Yeah,
because I think, as much as people think, oh, two brilliant open sides that's playing together, as you pointed to, the reason why they've been looking really good are the likes of Ben Donald and James Botham doing a lot of dirty work that allows them the highlight reel moments.
And fingers crossed after playing last week and then coming off a 60 that Young, comes through that unscathed and should be able then hopefully to go full 80 this week, which I think will give us good impact throughout the game.
Yeah, and as long as we don't see Mackenzie Martin in the 19 jersey again, because there's something just
doesn't look right.
That. I said we've decided Bevan's going to be another halfback, so
yeah, Bevan and Hamer Webb, I think, really is the only other
I said the only other way you'd go maybe you might consider. Jennings is another option because you could always if Winnett goes down, you could always push him, but because Stevens hasn't played a lot of fullback. He's got the option there.
Ben could go back as well, but
that's what I'm saying is like you have Ben come back, so Jennings steps in at 12 as opposed to necessarily having a winger.
I think like you do have to consider Jennings after last week, but I think just in terms of coverage and best option in terms of like. I think you also have to hope for best case scenario that you're making a tactical sub and bringing somebody on to impact the game rather than just covering injuries, and that Hamer Webb is the best option of the two for that.
Yeah. I agree. What? HW. So our sort of predicted 23, which is always a mishmash of who we'd like to see and what we think is going to happen. So we have got in the correct order, 15 to 9, 1 to 8, and then bench. Winnett, Grady, Lilo, Ben Thomas, Ewan Stevens, Callum Sheedy, Alan Davis, Corey Dom, Dav Hughes, Kieran Azarati, Josh McNally, Teddy Williams, both them, Thomas Young, Big Al, and then a bench of Evan Lloyd, Ed Byrne, Beast Electric, Seb Davis, Alex Mann, Mackenzie Martin, Ellis Bevan, and Gabe Hamer Webb. That sounds pretty spot on to me.
Yeah, and I think if it was that 23 or pretty close to it, probably one of our strongest 23s of the season so far there as well. So
I'd say so. Yeah, I think it's pretty good front row stuff. I mean, literally the only thing that makes that stronger is a Falatau and a Jack Adams, who are still looking like they're going to be on board to play against the Dragons after the internationals. Speaking of, because both of those two are going to be training and rehabbing with the squad, let's move on to the Wales squad. So, quite a few Cardiff players selected, quite a few ex-Cardiff players selected. So if you go on people who've been Cardiff ex-Cardiff Academy, we're doing very well. I think just focus on the actual Cardiff players for this. So Evan Lloyd, Kieran Azarati, Botham, Ben Thomas, Ellis Bevan, Mason Grady.
Can win it.
How have I forgotten Can win it? Just because he's there written in pen in my head. I forget on. But I think I think everyone pretty much deserves their call up there, I think.
Yeah, I think Evan Lloyd might be slightly lucky, just because he obviously didn't have the greatest game in his sort of final audition on Saturday, and then we mentioned on the pod last week that Brodie Coughlin's been going pretty well at the
And had
Dragons.
another very good game.
Yeah, so
Has to be said. I mean, I was one of the people who was a bit surprised Coughlin was getting in. The only thing I'm going to go lean on with this one is Evan Lloyd has been in camp before.
yeah.
And Gatlin doesn't like changing people who've been in camp unless it's to replace them for someone who's already been in camp themselves.
And I also think bringing Elias back, I know he sort of divides opinion a lot amongst Welsh fans, but I think the likelihood is, looking at, obviously Derry Lake's going to start as captain and deservedly so, the best hooker by some distance in the country. And then it's probably going to be Elias off the bench then. So realistically, that third choice player is not good. I don't think they're going to, bar injury, they're not going to see a huge amount of minutes. I think Gatlin said he's not going to rotate as he used to do when we sort of had 4 internationals and we'd have one against a sort of lesser opponent, in inverted commas. We've become the lesser opponent for other teams.
The most stress-inducing game of the year. Yes.
So I think it's unlikely that third hooker will see too much action. So having Lloyd in there, who's been in camp, and you can maybe work with him a bit closer to do some more specific skill development, might hopefully aid him and not break him, as maybe all too often happens for some of those squad players. But the other guys absolutely deserved. I think maybe both of them was a slight surprise just because of the back row options that we've got, and that he has been a bit injured the last few weeks, but he was great again last weekend. And Gatland obviously really likes him. He is a sort of archetypal, like, test match animal type guy. He really rises to those sort of occasions. Plus, he gives you really good flexibility as a bench option, covering 6, 7,
reminds
and
me
8.
a lot of the sort of Josh Navidi role as well, where he's probably not the best at any one thing, but one thing he's very good at is taking pressure off other players so they can shine.
Absolutely, yeah. He's definitely stepping into that role, and he's, the thing to remember about Jim as well, he's still pretty young. Yeah, he's still got plenty of improvement to do. So the other guy is definitely in there, and then I think the one guy who obviously didn't make it and is particularly unlucky is Teddy Williams, who's been fantastic for us this season and definitely playing the best rugby of his career. But I think it probably, there was, I was involved in some back and forth on Twitter about Carter and Teddy. I don't necessarily think that was the head-to-head, actually. I think Carter is there more as your sort of Will Rowland's backup, and then you've got sort of questions are on the other side with Rowlands and Carter as your tight head locks, questions as your loose head, width, athletic, flexible lock. And then the guys in the middle, you've got Beard, slightly closer to the tight heads in that he can play at tight head lock, but isn't a big carrier, is more of your set piece guy. And then you're looking for somebody in that gap then between Beard and Shunza, and they've gone for Freddie Thomas, who I think who's got in ahead of Teddy, which I think on form, just sort of straight up head to head, is where Teddy's unlucky. But ultimately, I think it comes down to Freddie Thomas at Gloucester needing to be capped in a position where we don't have much depth. And yeah, England might not imminently be calling for him, but we can't really take the chance after the Faye Weboso debacle of losing lads in key positions to England. And then also that Thomas is a genuine 6 option as well. And I know some people might make the argument that Teddy can play 6, and at club level, I think you might get away with it, but I don't think he's got top end pace or athleticism at test level. And judging by you shaking your head, I think you agree. So,
I mean, my wider thing of I think it takes a genuinely special player to be able to play both.
Yeah.
Like I could do a job at and being able to play at it. As well with Ben Carter, he does have the added advantage as well as he is a very good leadership option. He's the captaincy at Dragons person, and most importantly, he was on the summer tour. So
yes,
presumably, because it's going to be a very short camp before the games, they're not going to want to change too much. So
yeah, that continuation is
so
important.
If him already knowing all the calls and everything, because obviously Teddy was injured for that tour, it does give him to that. Big Mac as well. People sort of were expecting him to be in there as an 8 option. I think with Wainwright and Plumtree, is probably your first and second choice 8s. two very similar players, like good line-out forwards, very good on the edge, and they've been playing. Maybe not so much at Wainwright, but I feel Wainwright has the credit in the bank
Absolutely, yeah.
and looked very good. Looked good enough against Bennett. Benton, yeah, not Bennett, yeah, Benton. Whereas I feel like Big Mac, obviously he's sort of coming back, and he is going to have to try and force his way through past out Big Al, who's fighting. I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything to Gatland about game time, but I feel like he's probably unlucky. I think along with a lot of other sort of those fringe players, I think keep an eye out for the Japan tour, because I think that's where they're going to get games. Like with the likes of Dan Evans, I think they're going to go. Like you're probably going to see him on the tour because you're going to have Anscombe and Costello's your out and out tens. Ben Thomas, who once again Gatland has suggested maybe playing him at 12. And also Grady on either 13 or wing, which is no surprise to everyone. So it looks like jockey one, as far as I'm concerned. There,
yeah. Overall, I just think it's quite a good squad. Actually, though, I'm relatively excited by it. I think particularly the pack is the best set of forwards we've picked since the World Cup. Maybe even since before the World Cup, considering that a lot of the forwards at the World Cup were about 400 years old and were running on fumes. So I think there's really good depth and good quality there through that forward pack. I think halfback does look a lot better with Thomas and Anscombe coming back in, particularly Thomas, obviously a genuine Lions contender and world-class player. The outside backs is the concern, probably, is in the sense that there's a lot of exciting talent there, but test level wise it's very inexperienced, and there's not a lot of depth across the back three in particular, and at 13. And then also the sort of added thing is that there is scope within the backline selections for Gatland to be really boring and unimaginative and sort of stick with Grady at 12 and Watkin at 13 or something like that. And I hope that's not the case.
He could go Grady at 12, Max Llewellyn at 13, just to sort of really. You've got Blair Murray, who's quite a physical winger for his size. He could very easily go quite. I mean, actually, you can go Eddie James 12.
I don't mind
13
Eddie.
Grady wing, and you're looking at a very physical backline.
I don't mind Eddie at 12 in that physical backline though, because I think he is the best distributor of those big physical guys. That he does have quite a decent passing.
He grew up playing 12, playing 10 to be fair.
Yeah.
So and actually, I knew people have questioned me on this, and I've actually gone through the video. But in that game against us, he was doing a lot of the clearance kicking.
Yeah.
It wasn't. They were going. Gareth Davis was whipping it back out and then going there.
He's a different triple threat to Ben Thomas in that their strengths within those triple threat of run, kick, pass lie in different areas. Obviously, Ben is pass and kick, and then Eddie is his carrying is a lot better, and his run and his pass and kick are below Ben. But I think the issue would be is that I think an Eddie, Max and Mason, if he was on the wing, that could be really exciting. But unfortunately, what you would end up with, you would it's exciting if they're given the license to play a bit, but you have the bad feeling under Gatland that they would not have that license at all, and it would just be head down arse up.
All three pick and go off successive rucks.
Yeah,
but I mean, to be fair, it would make yards. Yeah, I said it's quite good. I'm not saying that we'd win. I still have a niggling feeling we're going to lose all three games. But there's a potential with this squad to see what the plan is. I think that's got to be the bare minimum. Is we've got to see what's going on.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that Fiji game's massive. If they win, if they can sneak a win in that one, they can go on and beat Australia. Then I think with a bit of confidence behind them, I think we can all write off the Springboks game. Even now, there's absolutely no point predicting a win there. But if
I mean, the peak 2019 Gatland Wales actually were beating the Springboks regularly.
Yeah,
I think would struggle.
Yeah, so, but I hope that we come out of the Autumn Internationals with okay, we know roughly what he wants from positions like 10 and 12. We know roughly what his back row balance is going to be, how he wants to use his tight five in terms of who carries and who does more of the donkey work. That's the hope. I think even if we lost all three games, like you said, if we come out with a clear indication of what the game plan is, how Jockey is very clear about what he wants Cardiff to be. If we have that from Gatland at the end of the autumn, then it's not necessarily panic stations. But if we have 3 losses and 3 totally different centre partnerships, and he's mixed up the tight 5 each time, and we don't really know still how Wales want to play, then it is sort of like what is the point of Gatland still being here? Like, we may as well just sort of soak up the payment and look to get a coach in who actually has a clear understanding of what they want to do. So yeah, that's where this Wales team is at the moment. It's very much all eyes on the coaching staff to implement something clear in their selection and game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for the listeners, we still need to discuss what we're going to do with the Autumn Internationals. I don't think it'll be necessarily similar format of discuss it, reviewing the previous game, starting the next one. We're hoping to get a couple of guests on, a bit similar to what we did in the autumn. Other than that, yeah. I don't think there's anything else left really for us to discuss.
No, all good this week.
We could do predictions for the Ulster game, but I mean, I'm still not sure if you've necessarily made me feel better from my 15 point Ulster win.
Is that what you said? All right.
I'll be honest, I almost wanted to change it and make it more when I saw who was refereeing the game. But the less said about that, the better, as we try to avoid talking about individuals. Do you want to throw a random prediction here? We'll say Carwyn said Cardiff by 27.
I'm going to say Cardiff by 5.
Yep, sounds good. Right then, so thank you all for listening. Thank you, Dan, for joining me. Thank you, Carwyn, for working very hard. That's all for this week. Catch you later.
That was the Cardiff Central Podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.